you see how internally people are saying, why bother if it's not going to be perfect? Or why start if I'm not going to finish it?
There's something about guilt. Like we might look at it as a negative, but I think that guilt works in so many different ways. And sometimes it could mean that we're just really, really good moms.
Teach yourself a trick that is doable and then add to it the next day, right? Like if you can wake up 10 minutes before your kid today, that's more likely to be 20 next week.
I always thought procrastination was unwanted feelings, like not dealing with it because it's just such unwanted feelings. Like, ugh, I don't want to deal with it while doing the task.
Genuine philosophy in life is once you accept things as things are, you can then focus on what you want to change.
My friends don't want to be my friends anymore. My relatives don't call me as much anymore. Well, you're changing and they're used to this other side of you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Today's episode was with Dr. Menije Boduryan. Dr. Menije is a licensed clinical psychologist and has her own private practice. She specializes in OCD and perfectionism. What's really interesting about this conversation, and I'm going to start with this, is because we all think that perfectionism is task related. She dropped a bomb today in today's episode and said it has very minimal to do with task, but majority also has to do with saying no. And when someone hurts you, being more expressive and sharing your feelings on how that person has hurt you. It was really interesting to kind of hear that because, again, a lot of us think that perfectionism is maybe writing a paper and over again till it's, perfect, or cleaning the house, or, so on and so forth. So it was really intertwined with a lot of experiences. So perfectionism, some of you argue that it could be from trauma. Some say it's inherited. Some say it's developed. So she talked about how we develop this mindset, not necessarily a personality, but she said that it's a mindset. So it was really interesting to hear how to overcome. And in her latest program, she named it Breaking Up with Perfectionism. There's no such a thing as a healthy perfectionism. It does hurt you along the way. It creates resentment. It destroys a lot of relationships. It destroys the connection with yourself, your authentic self. So I really loved hearing her research, her thoughts, and how she treats her clients that suffer from perfectionism mindset. We did dive into a little bit of OCD, but I think what really was fun about this episode is you guys' questions. I've had maybe about 20, 25 questions turned in. We only got to maybe 5 or 6 of them, but it was really beautiful how she answered all those questions. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode with Dr. Menije Boduryan. Thank you for watching and do not forget to subscribe. Thank you guys. Hi.
Hello, hello.
So Dr. Menije Boduryan,
Yes,
how are you?
I am very good. We're testing, right? Because I'm just.
No, we
wait.
started.
You said testing.
We're
Oh, gosh.
Hey,
All
we
right.
broke the ice.
Yes, yes. Talk about imperfections.
Oh
You
my
see,
God.
this is what happens. Yes.
How are you?
I am very good. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to, first of all, we have been following each other for how long? Like past COVID, right? Or was
It
it?
actually was right around COVID that I met you online,
Yes.
and it's been so wonderful to connect with you.
Oh my
And
God,
thank you
you
so much
too.
for having me here.
Absolutely. It's my honor. I really genuinely enjoy your work. I think it's so unique. Tackling perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectionists. There's a lot of people who are perfectionists, huh?
Yes, it takes one to treat one.
Oh my goodness. That's right.
Let's just break the ice.
That's
I'm here
right.
to be vulnerable. So,
I love that. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah. It really came from my own personal, obviously, journey as well. That's
I
why.
think so. I think that, but that's what makes you a better therapist when you've like experienced the trauma of it, the heartache of it yourself. Like it's
Yes.
not just what you learn
Mm-hmm.
or the different diplomas hanging from your wall, it's personal experience.
Yes.
What
yes.
was your personal experience with perfectionism?
So for me, I mean, how I uncovered I was struggling with it happened about a decade, a little bit over a decade ago. It was like towards the end of my 20s. I read Brené Brown's book.
Brene Brown, which
Yes,
one?
Gifts of Imperfection.
That's a really good book.
Yes, it was such a
That's a
rude
really good
awakening, and it was in that book that I understood what I was struggling with for,
Mhm.
many years, like the whole feeling like I'm, doing something wrong or did I upset somebody, feeling that sense of like worry and anxiety that's stemming from wanting to do things perfectly and make sure that, like you're your
What?
perfect self wherever you go. And
Wait,
that's
sorry to cut you
yeah,
off. You
yeah.
said something really interesting. You said to upset someone.
Oh, yes.
That's part of perfectionism?
Yes.
Because people think perfectionism is all items based, to clean, to
Yes.
write a perfect paper.
It's all task oriented, right? That's what we
Correct.
typically think. And then in relationships, you see a lot of people pleasing and codependency.
Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
So that's part of perfectionism
It
is let
really
me
is.
make you happy because
Mhm.
when you're upset, I can't sit with your discomfort. So I'll
Yes,
go out of my way to make you smile, but I'm killing myself slowly because of that.
absolutely. Again, Brené Brown has this beautiful saying, like, to keep the peace inside, you start a war. To keep the peace outside, you start a war inside.
Yeah.
And what's interesting though, like the reason it shows up also in relationship, not just like academic goals or work related goal, has to do with what's in the core of it, which if we could just dive right into it, is
Hmm.
that you feel like you're just not good enough. I know that's maybe been said a million times now in social media, but
Hmm.
it really is in the essence, it's this self-doubt and lack of self-love where you wonder there's something about you that's not good enough and that
Mm.
you don't belong. So for me, that was part of my story too, coming here middle of my adolescent, feeling like I'm always one step behind from everybody, whether it's the understanding the cultural nuances and the jokes and
Oh, yes.
the conversations. And so something latches onto that idea that maybe there's something not good enough about you. And so in relationships, you
Mm.
think if I am the perfect person and if I don't upset you and if I can tell your needs before you even have to tell me what they are, and we don't fight at all, we don't have any confrontation because perfect relationship is supposed to be these peachy, no fight, no argument settings, then I will feel love, I will feel safe, and I feel like I belong.
But then when you go home, you slowly eat away your soul
Yes.
because you're not being authentic and true to yourself
Oh,
and really
yeah.
being articulating how you feel. And when you say relationships, this probably goes to relationships with your mother-in-law,
Hmm.
relationships with sister-in-laws, friends, correct?
All relationships, right? School, social,
Yeah.
dating, and family relationships. And it's this false expectation you put on yourself that you should always be ahead of people in assessing their needs and feeling over responsible. I mean, it's it really comes from a very insecure place, but it's almost borderline arrogant to think that you can tell everybody's needs all the
Mhm.
time. Like
That's
you would,
interesting.
yes.
Where does that stem from? Where how do we develop that sense of arrogance or how do we develop that need to continuously prove everybody or not prove everybody, make everyone happy around us?
I do believe that at the core of it, and this is, of course, coming from a very compassionate place, I do believe that we're wired for social connection.
Yes.
I do
Yes.
believe that we're social beings, right? Like one of the things I never forget, and forgive me, I'm not going to remember the exact name of the research study, but there was one in like early 60s or 70s where they did with this monkey where there was a wired
The
monkey.
mirror neurons
Was it the
study?
one like the baby monkey that
Mhm.
had this wired mommy
Mhm.
looking that had the milk bottle, and then there was another monkey that was made out of like cushions and
Yes.
pillows, and the monkey would go
Yes.
towards the one that was soft and comforting,
Nurturing.
right,
Yes.
nurturing. And we understood even in this very simple ways how we're wired for connection, safety, comfort. And I do
Mm.
think that I always tell my clients like struggle with people pleasing, I say that it's a side effect of connection. You know how you take medication, there's side effects like
Of course.
nausea, let's say maybe upset stomach. And that's so we kind of like obviously within reasons tolerate the side effects to get the help we need. So I told them like sometimes people pleasing is a side effect of wanting connection, which doesn't mean you should keep being a people pleaser, but it's actually looking at the problem from a compassionate place. I think it really comes from need for connection and belonging.
Yes, I agree. How much of that is impacting people's lives? Like, I'm sure you see people that have anxiety attacks from it, and I guess what I'm trying to say is it creates disconnection. You
Hmm.
might I feel like if I am trying to make a person happy in a relationship by not really being authentic, even if they're hurting me,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
right? Like I'll still be nice and I'll still be really kind and respectful. That distance me from that person.
Yes. Yes.
So what's a good balance
Well,
with that empathy piece and that compassionate piece?
I think one of the things I also want to mention is the resentment,
Yes.
right? So what happens in couples therapy, I often see it where one partner gets to a point of burnout
Yes.
and resentment, and then they look at all the things they've done for the other person. And the
Mhm.
ugly truth is that was never asked of you, or you never communicated, hey, these are the things that I can maybe offer to you. Would like, not that we sit down and like, tally up what we
Yes.
give and receive, but having that conversation. So when you mentioned disconnection, I wanted to also point out, like, not being our authentic self and giving more than asked or even necessary leads to burnout or resentment. So you end up exactly, I think, what you're pointing out, what starts as a good intention, like I want to have a quote unquote perfect relationship, which what we're really trying to want is happy relationship, turns into a resentful, burnout, disconnected, isolated relationship because you don't know me anymore.
So let's say there's a couple and the husband or the wife, vice versa. They're both, well, whatever, which one of them is a severe people pleaser.
Yes.
And I hear this a lot in our culture
Mm-hmm.
where either the husband is all about other people and not the family, or it's the wife, so,
Yes.
like heavy people pleasers. Is that really, and the relationship is bad, they're seeking couples therapy. Do you feel like that relationship is something that can heal?
Every relationship can heal. I think it's the matter of how much energy I think that's left in us, because that's the
Oh, wow.
truth. I
That is
do I
truth.
do want to be honest and like raw about,
Please, please.
sometimes
Yeah,
we run out of energy and
true.
there's not much left to give, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you don't value long-term relationship. But it's this reality that by the time maybe we are looking at the problem, we ran out of we ran out of things to
Yeah.
give. I try not to make any, obviously that black and white, like, oh, this relationships can heal, this relationship can't. I do, when you look at Gottman's research,
Mhm.
they do have masters versus disasters. There's a reason why there are
True.
relationships that are really struggling. I also believe in unlearning things.
Mhm.
So when you mention like those relationships, which is very common in our culture, where we have a really hard time finding a balance between being there for our extended family members and
Yeah.
being there for our partner, I think things can be unlearned. No
Yes.
matter where you are in your life and how long your marriage has been going, you can start a new chapter. But it about like, are you willing to revamp that
Mhm.
energy and like, because you can't pour from an empty cup. You
Absolutely.
can't tell me, well, I've been in this marriage for 12 years. Like,
Yeah.
you have to be able to reset.
That's so true. The reason why I'm asking is because, this morning I put a question out. I said, if you guys have any people pleasing questions, let me know. I'm going to ask Dr. Boduryan. And all of them were task related.
Oh,
And that's why I keep going into these. And it might sound kind of unorganized, you guys, but I'm going from all aspects so that people
yeah,
understand that
yeah.
perfectionism isn't all task related. Like
Yes.
it's about people pleasing
Mm-hmm.
and wanting other people happy versus yourself. So you have this program. I kind of looked into it. It said divorcing your, right? Is that what it
Breaking
was?
up, breaking up.
Breaking
Yes,
up with
yes.
your perfectionism.
Perfectionism.
Tell us a little bit about that and
Yes,
what the
yes.
program's all about.
So I do have, obviously, for people who are in California, I do
Mm-hmm.
offer therapy for them. But over
Yes,
the years, I wanted to reach out to more people, and I know you relate to that.
of
So
course.
I created a self-help course, and it walks you through, like, the first module is like looking at the root causes of your perfectionism and really uncovering sequence of events that may have shaped your perfectionism. Then I walk people through their thought patterns, because it's so important
Mm-hmm.
to look at the all or nothing thinking we have and the inner critic. That's another thing about perfectionism people often don't understand, because we think perfectionists are very confident because they
Correct.
establish a lot. They are high achiever. They're, typically, a lot of people who have high goals for themselves, big dreams for themselves, they tend to be a perfectionist, but that doesn't mean they're confident.
And also, I'll add to that, it also doesn't mean that they're very liked.
Hmm.
I have worked with some perfectionists, and I have to be honest, they're very difficult people
Yes.
to work with.
Yes, yes. So if you get the people pleaser like I used to be, I would do whatever you needed. But then there's of course, like you mentioning, the other side of perfectionism, where they can be very rigid on the way
Mm-hmm.
they want things to be done. And they actually also can complain a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Not because, again, at the core of it, it's not because they're mean people,
Yeah.
but the pressure to have the perfect results make them forget what it means to be a team player, what it
Mm.
means to be flexible and compromising and accommodating. It's really is a pressure, and there's, in our minds, there's a fear that if the outcome is not perfect, I will lose my status. I will lose my job. I will lose your approval of me. I
Is that
will lose.
trauma? Is that tied to trauma?
I think there is anxious and avoidant attachment.
Mm.
It's absence of secure attachment.
Absence of secure attachment.
Yes. And to your
So
point, some
childhood
of it could be,
comes
yes,
from
it
childhood.
does. It does come from childhood. It does.
So how can parents do a better job with the secure attachment versus the anxious? I mean, you see a lot of kids that are super
Yes.
anxious. I
Yes.
mean, when I go back and I like view my life, I always look at the yes, everything can start from like childhood, but I think children start feeling it more when they get into, schools, like when they start kindergarten or daycares.
Yes.
That's when you actually leave mom or dad for several hours. I don't know. Do you think it stems from that? Maybe it's something different.
I think
You
that,
are the pro at this.
oh no,
Educate me, please.
what I've come to realize though is that our lives are so complicated, right? And I do realize we're so multifaceted that all I can ask people when we have these conversations, and of course I'm happy to explore more, but what I really like to start with is, there's no one shoe that fits all. There's never going to
Mm,
be one place from your life I can pinpoint. I cannot say age 5. I cannot say middle school. I cannot say, oh, the day your parents
yeah,
divorce. Unfortunately, I think
true.
that's what people are looking for when
True.
they ask us those
Yeah, the
questions, right?
wanting to know.
Yes. If you could just tell me where it happened, maybe I can just hyper focus on that area.
Yes.
But the answer,
Make it
it's a
better.
sequence of events.
True.
It's really is, because one of the things I also talk about, because when I tell people I unpacked my perfectionism in my late 20s, and here I am, 40 years old, they think I might not struggle with this. But when I had my daughter 7 years ago, it was right there. It
Yeah.
said, because here's the other thing about perfectionism, I realize it latches on to anything you value. And it says, for things to be meaningful, for things that you care, for things to have value, you must do it perfectly. That's why it doesn't just stop at my work, it follows me to my marriage, it follows me to my relationships, my friendships. And it said, anything that you care about, anything that you value, for it to be meaningful, you have to do it perfectly. So you struggle with that thought and you tell yourself, no, I don't. My authentic, imperfect self is good enough. And it's our imperfect selves that come together that makes this thing,
Mm,
crazy thing called life, beautiful.
that's powerful.
Yeah.
How do you help somebody who's struggling with perfectionism? Like, what are your steps? Like, what do you do? Because that's meaningful. I bet they're in such relief after.
Yes, I think there's relief, but there's also ambivalence
Mm,
because I also like to honor that perfectionism serves us well, and there's a grief that comes with it.
does it?
Yes, because it's because I did things perfectly at some level that I got into the schools I got into, right? And I did things perfectly or really well to some extent that I was maybe given leadership roles. So I do always honor that when we do things well, we get rewarded, we get invited to places, and we get people's attention. People may want to, be curious about us. And so I don't want to deny that it may have started well, but realizing that it doesn't end well. That eventually the pressure to do things perfectly
Hmm.
will make us overgive, as we were talking earlier, right? Overdo things and think that we haven't done enough. We haven't enough done to rest. Self-care is selfish. I haven't done enough. I need to keep doing. I need to check up on another family member, right? You checked in on your mom today, but what about your aunt? What about your brother? What about your partner? Did you guys have any date nights? So again, that to-do list never ends.
It doesn't. And
No.
I see people sometimes too, they are very, very involved in family conflicts. And
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who get called all the time. Your brother is fighting with his wife. You have to come down now. And it's like two.
Yeah.
And I see these things, and again, it stems from that perfectionist, right? Like that not being able to say no.
Yes, it
That's so
does. It
powerful.
does. And it's all of these unhealthy expectations in our relationships
That
that
we
we,
allow.
yes, because we confuse kindness, loyalty with, like it gets confused that if you are unavailable
Hmm.
and if you happen to not pick up your phone, you're not being dependable,
Hmm.
or you're not seen as helpful. And so we think that if I'm a loyal, consistent, helpful family member, like a sister or a daughter, then I have to pick up all the calls. I have to be thinking about every detail,
Everyone's problems,
everyone's
everyone's
problem.
heartache.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
so much.
And we're glorified for it. You
Mhm.
know that. Like, look at all the compliments we get. Of
But when is it enough, right?
yes, yes.
Do you think that you start seeing health issues with people who do have this? Is it a personality, by the way? Is being a perfectionist a personality type? I don't know.
I've looked into it, and I think that there's not an agreed definition in the sense that, like, sometimes I think about it as a mindset. I do
Yeah.
look at it as like a mindset, and then other days I think it becomes your personality because obviously they get integrated, right? Like the way you think affects the way you behave, and the way you behave then becomes who you are eventually. So I do think that it becomes all one. Whether you want to think about it as a mindset or a personality thing, but to going back to health problems and also like how can people work on this perfectionism. I do hope like conversations like this make us more aware, but still
Yeah.
till this day I still get people coming to therapy because they
Hmm.
have anxiety, they have insomnia. Um
From this mindset.
Exactly,
My
exactly.
goodness.
But they don't come in saying, I think I have unrealistically, high expectations of myself that's killing me. They don't. They say, I'm having sleep problems. They say, my appetite is off. I am so fatigued. I'm lethargic. I don't have energy. Like, I'm unmotivated. Oh, that's one last thing I wanted to add to, like, how people pleasing was the unexpected
Yes.
sign of perfectionism. Another
You
big one
dropped a
is,
bomb with
I
that
know,
one.
like, we started right with that, is procrastination.
I always thought procrastination was unwanted feelings, like not dealing with it because it's just such unwanted feelings. Like,
Yes.
ugh, I don't want to deal with it
Yes, yes,
while
yes.
doing the task. Is
Yes.
that what it is?
I do believe I agree with you that or at least I really come to better understand how we are never avoiding the task, we're avoiding the feeling we have
Yeah,
about the task.
exactly.
So I totally agree with you that I think
Exactly.
procrastination is an emotional response. What was also, again, kind of integrated into that vicious cycle of paralysis analysis
Mm-hmm.
is, why are you so overwhelmed by this task? Like if I
Yes.
interview somebody and I tell them like, okay, so you want to work on your resume and it's very overwhelming for you, which you're avoiding the overwhelm by watching TV or playing video games.
Yes. Or a phone. Today's distraction.
Yes, you're on
It's,
TikTok, you're on
yes.
social media. And when I ask them what's so overwhelming about this, then we, again, this is where sometimes think about it as such a cognitive issue or mindset problem. You see how internally people are saying, why bother if it's not going to be perfect?
Oh,
Or
wow.
why start if I'm not going to finish it? Why start if it's not going to turn out really well? And I know it's, again, these one liners are sometimes too catchy, but they really are powerful. And one of them is, done is better than perfect.
I
And,
love that.
and people forget that
Done is better
prog-
than
done
perfect.
is better than perfect, progress over perfection. And
Wow.
that's why I say perfectionism lead to procrastination, because people procrastinate only when they think that they have to do it perfectly and forget the power of showing up.
I'm still curious, like where this stems from. I mean, I know we're not going to pinpoint it exactly because everyone's life is different, everyone's experiences are different, but I always think of, could it be that, children are pressured a lot? Um, they're compared a lot. A lot of, children nowadays are, their grades are compared to their
Yes.
classmates.
Yes.
The way they clean their room.
Mhm.
Oh, so and so's room is cleaner than yours. I went to their
Yeah.
house for coffee, and oh, you should have seen how her daughter was sitting, and so on and so forth. But this can lead to perfectionism, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, comparison is thief of all joy, and we know that comparison trap is a big one. So, what I would still encourage people to do is, obviously, this takes time and a lot of journaling, but I would love them to look at the story of their lives and how it unfolded. And absolutely start from childhood and see how your relationship with your parents were.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to jump to that answer when we talk about what causes perfectionism,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it's just too, it's kind of like too juicy of an answer. Like, oh, it must be my mom, it must be my
Mm-hmm.
dad. Not always, but
Not
of course,
always,
it's a
yeah.
good place to start. Start from your childhood, look at your relationship with your parents,
Yeah.
because I know there are so many of us did grow up with very demanding parents. They
Mm-hmm.
did, there's so many people out there that did grow up with parents who overvalue what we call overvaluing achievements and overvaluing, like you said, the grades. And I think that unintentionally, one of the social messages I grew up with a lot were what it means to be a good girl.
Oh,
And good
wow.
girls don't make a lot of noise, good girls don't complain,
They don't get
good girls
angry.
don't get dirty.
Mm-hmm.
They sit properly, they do their homework when it's supposed to be. And it wasn't like so explicitly, but I think there was this implicit messages. Or another thing that happened unintentionally for me was how I was rewarded indirectly for doing things that were
How
well
were you
behaved of me,
rewarded?
with a lot of praise.
Yeah.
And my sweet older brother, he's just a year older than me, 18 months older than me, but he struggled at school. So my well behaved, patterns got amplified when you
Oh.
look at some of his struggles, or some of his, I think when I look back, it's a very typical, maybe boy behavior. But when you look at how he was and how easygoing I was, I think I became even more appreciated for how clean I kept my room and how quickly I would just do my homework when I came home from school. And then I would say my school environment was very traditional in that way. There was very clear expectations of what it means to be a good student
Mm-hmm.
and what that looks like. And in our culture, we value those things. And I don't think it's all bad. I'm not here to say, because that's another kind of, I don't want to call it a complaint, but a conversation I have with clients or with people. They think when you question or start to work on your perfectionism,
Mm-hmm.
they're afraid that they're going to be quote unquote mediocre, and then I'm asking them to lower their standards.
Oh, my goodness.
And I always reassure them that this is not about lowering your standards. It's not about taking your dreams away from you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about how you're going about your dreams and making sure you're not killing yourself along the way.
Wow. So people think that by, I wouldn't say giving up, but slowing down that mindset is tied to, oh, so you want me to be
Mediocre.
mediocre.
Really?
Like you
Yeah.
really want me to
Yeah.
fail like
Oh, yeah, yeah,
that?
yeah. Like as if none of my dreams are gonna come true now. I'm not gonna get into school I want. I will get fired if I'm not this careful, if I'm not like, triple checking my emails. I will make a huge mistake that will cost me my career. So as you can see, what also reinforces perfectionism, because this is where it's so multi-layered, is our what we call catastrophic thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We think the worst case scenario,
We
we
do.
miscalculate. And that's what
Yes.
I always try to encourage people to sometimes, I one of the things I once read somewhere that I loved, it said our minds can play tricks on us, and our minds misreads situation, right? Miscalculates, and we have to be willing to obviously step back and maybe question, what if I didn't work 3 hours on this presentation and I only did it half of that time, like an hour? Like what if I
Wow.
take that chance a little bit? So sometimes actually therapy or working on your perfectionism becomes a little bit of an experiment. Like you have to do exposures.
Yes.
Like look at me, I came here late. Try to open this at the same time.
Do you need
No,
help?
I'm like, okay, no, because I'm pressing the wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like some of it is exposure, right? Some of it is doing things outside of your comfort zone. What I like to call it opposite actions. And try to maybe gather data for yourself because you're so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, honestly stuck on assuming that doing it this way it has to be this way for this result. Can you do the opposite a little bit and see what kind of results you get? And as you and I both know, the world keeps spinning.
Yeah.
Nobody gets worried as much as you,
Yeah. You are
doing
your
the wrong
worst
thing.
critic.
Yes.
My God.
Yes.
The way that people tend to judge themselves,
Yeah.
I think people have, I think we're coming along and people are doing a better job. They're more mindful of therapy. They understand where they're more conscious. People are waking up and loving themselves more or trying to learn how to
Yes.
love themselves more. But with this comes this judgment.
Mhm.
It's like sometimes I hear people say just horrific things to themselves. Like when I mean horrific, I mean like really bad words. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you're so stupid. How could you have done this? And I've
Yes.
literally have heard people say that. So it's so unfortunate. I wonder if that's like learned. They picked that up from somebody saying that to them, or genuinely they feel that way. I don't know. It's
S-
horrible either way.
Yes, and I'm curious what your experience was with your son, but my daughter, like I said, she's 7 now, and there has been once or twice, caught her being harsh on
Hmm.
herself, right? And I've caught her, and it's a delicate balance between having her do her best, but also accept that it's not going to be great the first time.
Yes.
It's really is a delicate balance, and I think that I've noticed that they're going to be exposed to words, right? They're going to hear words like stupid, loser,
Hmm.
weird. So it's not that I could have, protect, not that's not even a protection, but it's not like I could have kept her in a bubble and not
Yeah.
have her hear those words. So she clearly got exposed to those words. I don't know, maybe four,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that. And then you start seeing kids use that in sentence.
Hmm.
That's weird. And then you correct them. Like, oh,
Hmm.
that's different.
Hmm.
It's unique. It's, more colorful, less colorful than you're used to. And then, as you said, when they make a mistake, those words do pop up from their vocabulary. And I just try to be mindful of those moments and get ahead of it a little bit so that we can redirect them. Because I think what happens to us is unfortunately we weren't redirected. And as you know,
Oh,
with
yes,
negative
that's true.
thinking patterns, it's because over and over again we kind of fell into that thinking patterns, and now we're 25, 30, and that's our kind of dominant or
Mm-hmm.
go-to self-dialogue.
That's true.
And so now, obviously, here we are going to
That's true.
therapy, doing our personal work, journaling, reading books, and trying to unlearn some of that and instead respond to stressors, hiccups, imperfections with more self compassion.
Do you have you worked with moms that struggle with this?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And the thing that I get that breaks my heart because mm, I would say all of these times, these moms are really genuinely good moms, but they are being very hard on themselves. And one of the things they say that really breaks my heart is, I'm traumatizing my kid.
I hear that
And I
majority of the
try to
time.
remind them, like, yes, it wasn't okay that you raised your voice today, and because when they tell you the incident, clearly it was a mistake, you know,
Yeah.
um, or something they forgot. So I always also like to remind people, and this is where things get really hard. Some of my mistakes are incredibly ugly. Some of my mistakes are not cute. For an example, I know I said this twice already, so you can see how I'm really like to be on time to places. I was late for 20 minutes here. It's a silly mistake,
Of
right?
course
You
it
and I
is.
both know.
Of course
But
it is.
not all my mistakes are silly. Not all my mistakes are adore like it's like I have your sympathy because you can tell, oh, she made that mistake because she really cares to be on time. Like it's
But
almost
do
like
you have sympathy for yourself, right? Do you
yes,
have
yes.
empathy for
So
yourself?
some of the mistakes can almost get people's respect,
Yeah.
right? And some of the mistakes we make are going to be genuinely uncomfortable to talk about.
Hmm.
So I don't deny that sometimes the mistakes we make as a parent is very disappointing. I don't deny or I don't sugarcoat that because I don't think that's how we're going to build
Hmm.
resilience, right?
True.
But I do tell them there's a difference between, yes, that moment was really something we really cannot repeat in terms of like shouting or, taking something away that was like, how the saying goes, like, the punishment doesn't match the crime,
Hmm.
right? Like, okay, you
Oh,
took
yeah.
something away that doesn't really match the crime. Like, they didn't need to be ground. I had a client once, and she struggled with so much people pleasing, and
Really?
so sad when she was growing up. Like, her parents would ground her for weeks, and when you look at that extent, like, geez, it didn't need
For
it.
weeks?
Yeah, yeah,
How
for
old was she?
like 7, 8.
Oh
And
my
for things
God.
like you said earlier, ironically, it's all full circle and it's so universal. It will be for things that not cleaning up, and and then you wonder why those things have really scarred us. So going back to our to moms out there that struggling with not being good enough, I really want us to first remember that it's not like we're traumatizing our kid. Let's not be extra punitive
Hmm.
towards our mistakes.
Catastrophizing.
Yes.
It goes back to what you were saying. We
Yeah.
tend to think the worst.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd like to add to that because, and I don't know how this is going to sound, but I think that those moms that tend to feel that way about themselves are genuinely the really, really good moms.
Yes. Yes.
There's something about guilt. Like we might look at it as a negative, but I think that guilt works in so many different ways. And
Hmm.
sometimes it could mean that we're just really, really good moms and we want to do the best.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes back to, like, as I know you feel the same way, holding space for our feelings.
Yeah.
I don't shy away from sitting with disappointment and guilt.
How did you overcome that, not sitting away from it?
I think that, like, as you just mentioned it, you have to, I think, through mindfulness, notice where it's becoming toxic because it's not healthy to sit, and I'm just figuratively saying, like, to sit
Mhm.
feeling guilty for hours and hours.
Or days,
Yeah,
even,
I mean,
right?
that's dwelling. At some point,
Hmm.
that's dwelling. And, at some point, what I like to call people, like, is it warranted? Is it a warranted guilt or an unwarranted guilt? And I also tell people, like, we often make mistakes we never thought we would make. We don't plan the mistakes. Again, I'm talking about like a healthy, average,
Hmm.
person. I'm not, extreme cases here. But like you said, when we are a kind human being, we don't plan our mistakes. So we have to give ourselves that compassion that we made mistakes we didn't think we were going to make. We don't wake up and say, I'm going to lose my temper on my kid today.
Of
It
course.
happened unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And so take accountability, learn from it. That's when I become a very solution oriented. Like, what do you have to have in place next time?
Yes.
So, do you want to wake up half an hour before your child wakes up? That's one of my favorite coping skills, by the way. As a parent, you must always wake up before your kids. And it
Yes.
drives me
It's so
crazy.
helpful.
People wake up at the same time as their kids, and I'm like, no wonder you're in a bad mood.
I
Like, the
know.
last thing I want is someone's attention or someone's need
Hmm.
when I just woke up and haven't even washed my face.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wake up before your kid.
Yeah. How can look, a lot of parents struggle with this though.
Yeah.
What has helped you with this goal? I mean, it's you
Yeah.
said you wake up how much earlier? Like an hour, 2
Yes,
hours?
an hour. I
Yeah,
mean,
me
the
too.
more I can wake up, I mean, the days that I used to do even an hour and a half was
Hmm.
amazing. But, and sometimes, like, again, this is where do the best you can.
Do the
Because
best you
there are
can. Yeah.
days I wake up just like 20 minutes before her,
Hmm.
right? Like, is that ideal? Like, in terms of like when I look at my, like, what I
Yeah,
could do? Of course, 20 minutes goes by super fast.
of
20
course.
minutes is like I brush my hair, the next thing you know, her alarm is going off. But it's like do whatever you can in a given moment.
Hmm.
So I think that another thing we often get very rigid or get paralyzed by is, well, all week long I haven't been really waking up before my child. Why bother this morning?
Yeah,
What's
that
the point?
mentality. Talk to me about that.
Yes. I feel like it's that all or nothing mentality. I don't like to, like, I'm not trying to like sum it up to these like known terminologies, but it really feels like that's what it is. It's this
What's the
black or white.
point?
Yes, what's the point?
So how do you
Or like clients
talk
that
to someone like
people would
that?
say, like, why bother with 20 minutes? If you think an hour is a good time, what's the 15 minutes going to do? And that's when I say progress over perfection. Like a little bit today, because that's also the reality of our human behavior, is that you have to, teach yourself a trick that is doable and then add to it the next day, right? Like if you can wake up 10 minutes before your kid today, that's more likely to be 20 next week, because increments, gradual improvement. But
Yeah.
sometimes I think we also want maybe quick wins and that immediate gratification or immediate reward. And we maybe undermine or devalue the value of consistent progress. Just wake up 10 minutes before your kid tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, it's simple. It's not difficult, but what is it about that we don't think that it is easy?
I guess I could also
Because moms are
yeah.
watching, they're going to be like, oh, she thinks it's so easy. Let her have a newborn.
Oh gosh. I mean, don't get me wrong, newborn and your daughter is still
You're going to get those. That's why I want to
yeah.
clarify that, hey, maybe it's not for the new, maybe everyone's different.
Well, something is better than nothing.
Yeah.
That's what I will come down to. Something is better than nothing. Even if that means you have 5 minutes um, alone time in the bathroom
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of the day, that's better than nothing,
Yes.
right? And 5 minutes before, waking up 5 minutes before your child is better than nothing.
Yeah.
I think we have to be honest with ourselves that it's not about this situation or that situation, it's our internal dialogue that says, why bother if it's not going to be this way? Why bother if I'm not going to wake up an hour before my kid? Why bother if I'm not going to, like, health wise? I think it's so important to be outside. It's so important to get some movement in our bodies, whether you want to dance or stretch or go for a
Yes.
run. One of the most common things we get is, well, why do it once if I can't do it 3 times a week? I'm
So
like,
what you're saying is yes,
yeah,
it's even that one time is something.
exactly. It's something. And you're more likely to go to 2 times a week if you have established 1 time a week. That's the reality that we don't want to face. That,
Yeah.
you see, one of the things I also like to talk to people about when it comes to perfectionism, as you said, is very task oriented, most definitely, is that there's a difference between overworking and doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sometimes don't want to do the work. That's doing the work. Going for a walk once a
Oh my
week
goodness,
is
that's
doing the work.
interesting. Can you say that again?
Which part? All
That
of
part.
it.
That's fascinating. So
Yeah.
sometimes when we don't want to do the work,
Mhm.
technically we are doing the work because we're self-caring. Is that what I heard you say?
I wanted people to know that doing the work sometimes means small steps towards the bigger goal,
Uh-huh.
right? That any step you can take is doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Because people again go from 0 to 100. They
Yeah.
don't do anything and then they overdo things. And then they get burned out and they have nothing left to give for a whole month, for a whole week, for the whole weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go back to that kind of like that rabbit thing, like, or hamster on a wheel.
Yes.
They go 100 miles an hour. So they're constantly overdoing things and getting burned out, overdoing things and getting burned out. Versus you got to do the work. And I think what I have lately been really looking at is consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much as motivation or maybe small work, like staying consistent with something.
Mm-hmm. Very important.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer some questions?
Oh, yes.
I just random, but I was like, oh my God, there's so many. And I really want to answer them because there's a lot. Okay. Where's the post? Are you ready?
I am.
The first one. Let me click see it all. Okay. Is being a perfectionist connected to OCD? This is from Lucine.
I love that question. The reason I love that question, this is where I'm going to get a little clinical. I specialize in OCD.
Ooh.
I've been specializing in it since 2019.
Uh-huh.
It's something that I'm very passionate about, and I take it very seriously because one of the things I know there's so much awareness around mental health, but there's still so much stereotype and like this
Mhm.
idea that like, oh, I'm so OCD.
Oh,
I
it's thrown
like
around
my
like
shoes. Oh,
candy.
like yes.
Oh,
Like no, we are not all OCD.
no.
So that's why I'm like I love this
No.
question and I love working with people who struggle with OCD. The way I can answer that question is that being a perfectionist does not mean you have OCD. But most people, like I'm talking about like 9 out of 10 people who have OCD,
Diagnosed with OCD, yeah.
yes, they are diagnosed with OCD. Most of them will say they have perfectionistic tendencies because doing things perfectly, like let's again, this is going to be a bit stereotypical example OCD, but it's easy to for people to understand.
Yeah.
Hand washing. If part of your OCD, one of your compulsions is to wash your hands excessively, what happens in that vicious cycle is that you want to do it perfectly to feel clean. So perfectionism ends up being a part of the OCD cycle to make the person feel like they are completing their compulsions perfectly. So it's more like perfection is an add-on to OCD, but perfectionism, as myself have struggled with it, I don't have OCD. I struggle with anxiety, and of course I have different life experiences, but that's how I can separate the two. That if you have perfectionism does not mean you have OCD, but when you have OCD, most often you have that perfectionistic
Tendency.
tendencies.
Versus actual diagnosis.
Yes, yes.
Caroline wants to know, does being a perfectionist mean I have a validation issue and insecure? Does, I guess, being a
Mhm.
perfectionist mean I have validation and issues of insecurities? Thank you for the question. I love it.
Yes,
Can you tell us more about that?
absolutely. And here's why I would say yes to that. Not because obviously I don't say like, oh, you have that problem. It's more like perfectionism. Actually, this will be a something that we haven't really touched on. It's also important to look at perfectionism as a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for some of us, when you mentioned trauma earlier, it's a survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're struggling with internally self doubt, insecurity, feeling inadequate, feeling incompetent, then you turn to perfectionism to mask that, which is why the myth that perfectionists are confident, that's a myth because underneath my perfect achievements lie a very insecure person. And the only way I can quote unquote tame my insecurity is by doing things perfectly and making sure I don't get found out.
Exposed, right?
Exposed,
Oh my
exactly.
gosh.
So most perfectionists, and there's, I've read wonderful books on this, struggle with imposter syndrome, fear of being fraudulent, and feeling like we don't deserve what we have,
Wow.
which doesn't match because everyone will say, you earned, you worked really hard for it, you earned it, but our internal inner critic will shut those compliments down really quickly. So the validation, unfortunately, becomes this race without a finish line. There's not enough validation to shut down my inner voice.
My goodness. That's
It's
pretty
very
powerful.
debilitating. It's
Yes,
very
I
debilitating.
can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, Caroline, I hope you had your question answered and hope it's helpful. Luce wants to know, is perfectionism due to childhood trauma? Wow. We have a lot of questions of this. Actually, we have like four of the same question. Is
Yes.
it related to childhood trauma?
For some people, absolutely it is. Yeah.
It could
Yeah.
be, right?
Absolutely. If you have childhood trauma, as I just mentioned, it puts you at risk of developing perfectionism.
Yeah. Like I can imagine if someone, a child is being abused
Hmm.
because things are not done the way that mom wants or dad. And so, yeah, you can develop that
Yes. Yes.
for
Here's
sure.
another version of it that I can maybe share with people. And it's not maybe, I don't know what people consider as trauma because you and I
Yeah,
know that trauma looks
it's
very
very
different
different for
for
everyone.
different people. But one of the things that happens to first generation immigrants is that when we know all the struggles our parents have gone to bring us to United States, then we feel like nothing we do is ever good enough to pay them for their sacrifices. So it's not good enough that I just went to law school. I have to
Oh,
become the best lawyer in Los Angeles. It's not good enough that I went to, get this degree or that degree. I must open the best business under that, industry. So, and again, when you look at that high achieving, oh,
are you there too?
I,
We just look at each other and we're like,
I know,
that's
sister, I get you.
that's me.
Yes, yes.
We just had like instant eye connection, like
I know
what?
we really did. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and you see, it's
powerful.
not maybe trauma as some people may think of it, but it's a childhood experience that does shape our perfectionism. And
Hmm.
again, the belief is my parents sacrificed so much for myself and my siblings to have the life we have.
Yeah, to come here
I
and
must
to,
make it worthwhile.
yeah.
That's the false belief behind it. And we forget, and maybe sometimes parents, because they are responsible, I mean, they do have a role in this, they fail to communicate to their children that all they want is their children to be happy.
Yeah. But I think also parents had to be conscious to communicate that. I mean, you can't,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like they tried their best and I mean,
Hmm.
they didn't know any better. Now we know now.
Yeah.
Studying and
Yeah.
education helps, but
Yeah. I have few clients, unfortunately, they are well established in these occupations that they don't want to,
they don't
they
like.
don't want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not fulfilled.
That's so true. That's so true. Just to make mom and dad happy.
Yes. Yep.
That's really sad. Oh, breaks my heart. Another question's from Anna. How do I not get angry when the house is in utter chaos, food on the floor, drawings on the wall? That's it. And sad faces.
Oh,
so,
so why do you get angry? Right? Like, why do you look at that
I'm thinking,
situation and
yeah.
do we get angry? Because have you ever told your client, like, this is one of the questions I sometimes love to ask? Because I say sometimes because I think it has to be at the right moment, but I often ask them, that thought in your head, whose voice is it?
Mm.
Who does it belong to? And
Yes.
it's often, again,
Mom.
I'm a mom. So I am
Mom's voice.
I'm a mom. I'm a feminist. I love women. I love supporting women, but I am going to go for mom right now for a
Yeah.
minute.
Hmm.
When you're in your living room right now and there's food everywhere, toys everywhere, whatever, the kitchen table is all messy, needs to be cleaned up. The
Who's
voice in
coming
your
in?
head is your mom-in-law maybe, right? Mother-in-law, your mom, your older sister
Wow,
maybe.
Manisha, that's so powerful. You're
That's
so right.
that says, "What is this? This is messy." Can I tell you a story? Oh, my mom is gonna my
Please. We're all
so
about the stories.
my daughter was born in January. So this might have been like spring, like April, May, right? She's only 4 or 5 months old. And it's all like it's hot outside, or at least it's warm
Hmm.
outside. And her feet are cold, right? Like that 4 or 5 months, her feet are
Yeah.
cold. And she goes, "You got to put some socks on her. You got to put some socks on her." I'm like, "Mom, it's 70 degrees outside. I'm not going to put socks on her." You know what she says to me? She's like, "Ah, you're raising her like an American."
Oh my
And I'm like, till this day, I'm like, am I supposed to be offended? You know? So do you see, that's
Yeah,
obviously, I say this to the story because my mom, like, is my best friend. I love
of
her so
course.
much.
But these
And
things stay with
they
you,
stay
you
with you,
know?
right? It's that mom's voice that
Yes.
says, "Why aren't the shoes put away?" It's mom voice that says, um, "You got that McDonald's again?" Or you got
Again,
them,
I know.
whatever. You ordered food again? So I'm afraid when you find yourself frustrated in a moment, as part of self compassion is to honor the feeling you're having, but then ask yourself, why am I getting angry right now?
And whose voice this
And
is.
whose voice is that?
Wow, I think that is the most powerful question that any person can ask themselves in times of this.
Yeah.
Exactly her question. Like, house is a mess,
Yeah.
and
That
there's
sounds like you guys are having
chaos.
a fun time
I know.
over there.
There you go.
You guys are having a
But
fun time
why is
over
it
there.
such a negative, right? Like, what's really
Yes.
going on?
Yes.
Wow. Anna, I hope that's helpful. And then we have Christine. She's asking, when does perfectionism create more harm than good? At what point?
I know I'm going to sound biased when I say this, but I wholeheartedly believe in this, which is why I speak about overcoming perfectionism. It always will. It will never end well. But you're right, it's a matter of when. And sometimes our perfectionism can hijack things right away, like a month into a new job, right? A month into a new relationship. You might
Mhm.
find yourself ruminating. And I have young women dating and, seeking therapy for dating. And a lot of their anxious attachment is leading to this rumination and worrying and like kind of like over playing conversations in their heads to see who said what and how
Hmm.
did they handle it. So I am going to stick to my guns on this one, that perfectionism never ends well. And that, because I think one of the conversations I sometimes get on social media is, there's healthy perfectionism, there's positive perfectionism, and my answer is no.
Yeah. Can you
Let's
tell
not,
us why you believe that there's a no?
because let's not dilute the conversation, right? Let's not say, do we, and I feel like you had a conversation like this on social media once. Like, there's no such thing as healthy addiction, there's no such thing as healthy depression, there's no such thing as healthy anorexia. Like, with those things, we're very cut and dry. And I
Right.
think we should have the same boundaries and same stand when it comes to perfectionism. And so what I like to encourage people to do is, Perfectionism is having unrealistically high expectations of yourself that causes all of the things we talked about: resentment, people pleasing, and other issues in your life. Opposite is striving for your excellence, striving for your best with an understanding that mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only key difference between perfectionism versus um healthy goal setting, healthy relationships, healthy boundaries, is knowing that in relationships, we will disappoint each other. We will say the wrong thing. But it's all about how fast can we turn it around. Like as a parent, you're going to make mistakes. I never, again, like I was saying earlier, I don't sugarcoat to my client that, yeah, the way you spoke to your child wasn't in their best like development, and it wasn't best, it wasn't aligning with your values.
Hmm.
But again, when you can tolerate that the house is going to be messy sometimes,
Hmm.
you can tolerate that some days you're going to wake up an hour before your kids and other days it's going to be 5 minutes, then life goes on.
With this question also comes this idea for me. You brought up a really good point. You said tolerate. The word
Mm,
tolerate.
yeah.
That is probably the most difficult thing. Now, you don't have to be a perfectionist or have the mindset to, but it's really difficult for mothers, some fathers, to stay with the feelings of, ugh, it's a mess. This
Mm-hmm.
is a mess. The house is a mess. Or even sometimes, well, this is a different topic, but I'll stick with this. So how can we, I mean, like, what advice would you give somebody on how to tolerate that mess? Like, for instance, a house is a mess,
Yeah.
it's a chaos.
Yeah.
This voice is telling me clean up because you're going to
Mm-hmm.
get judged, or whoever's voice is in there.
Yeah.
But how can you tolerate that messy house? How can you tolerate it for an hour, 2 hours, maybe a day or two?
One of the things I love is actions first, feeling second.
Actions first,
Feeling
feeling
second.
second.
So act the part. I know when I say this to people, they often say, oh, you mean like fake it till you make it? Not necessarily, because I personally, and I'm curious what you think about this, but I don't like that saying fake it till you make it, because I don't like the idea of faking it. I
Yeah.
instead like to, and I know this may sound like, oh, you're just playing with a bunch of words, but I do think that there's another way to approach this, which is I want to act the way I want to become, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to act. I may not be that person yet, but I want to act the part, because only through repetitive actions will I really become that person that I want to be. So I want to become a tolerant person. I need to
Mm-hmm.
act the part. What would an
Okay.
what would it look like for you to be a tolerant person? You're
Yeah.
not there yet. Because if you tell me from 1 to 10, how much are you tolerating this messy room? I'll tell you 0. I have 0 tolerance for this right now. But I still want your action to not match your feelings. Just because you can tolerate it doesn't mean you can. So again, I'm sorry. I'm like, I'll get to the point.
No, because it's so good.
Okay,
That's why.
what does it mean to tolerate it? Sit on the floor in the middle of those toys.
Expose yourself,
Again, have
right?
your action, because again, I'm going to put myself in those shoes and I'm going to imagine that I'm in my living room and it's messy. If I can't tolerate it, which is a feeling, I can't tolerate it, what do? I clean up.
Yes.
I cannot tolerate it and not clean up. Like my actions can go opposite of my feelings. So it's like I cannot tolerate the room being messy, like inside it eating me up.
Which is the
It's how she
feeling,
might feel.
right?
Yes, it's a feeling. Like I feel annoyed. I
Hmm.
feel
Like a bad mom,
fidgety. Yes,
horrible,
I
whatever.
feel. Yes, I feel. It's just this sucky feeling I have inside. But
Yeah.
I'm still gonna crisscross applesauce and sit on the floor with my kid.
Okay. And that's so
And maybe do
doable.
snow angels with the
Hmm.
dirty clothes
Make it
that's
worse.
around me. Yeah, make it worse. Exactly. Put over your head. Put the, socks on your hands like mittens.
But that's doable though, because as you
Yeah,
said in the beginning, we tend to like dramatize everything at times. So yeah, it
we
is a
do.
feeling, and if
Yes.
it's you can tolerate it,
Yeah.
stick with it. Maybe,
Yes.
do you think that that's going to teach you? What's that going to teach you?
Yes. Because when actions come first, it changes your feeling. Here's the other problem, and this is going to go back to a little bit like goal setting conversation. But one of the reasons people procrastinate is because they want their feeling state to change before they can take an action.
Mm.
So many people tell me, I don't feel motivated. I don't feel motivated. And to some extent, I know this is not going to sound very compassionate, but mind you, I have a good relationship with my client when I say this.
Of course.
I told them, forget about feeling motivated. You got to do what you got to do. And that's what Nike's Just Do It is such a great branding, because they know you just got to do it. The
Yeah.
feelings will follow. Actions first, feelings second. So if you want to become a more tolerant person of some disorder in your house, especially by the end of the day, then act the part. And it's
I'm
not
going to
fake
take
it
that
till make it.
advice. I'm going to take that advice. That's so powerful because I
Mhm.
am one of those moms. My house has to be super clean, and I just like that clean environment.
I do too.
But sometimes it's so hard. So
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to do action first, tolerate it,
Hmm.
and then,
Because I want to honor that. I think psychological wellness can also come from having a home environment that
absolutely
is
it does.
peaceful. So I
Absolutely.
don't dismiss also that aspect of needing a living space, whether it's our
Yeah.
bedroom or our living room, that is within reasons orderly. I do think that's part of self care. I do think that's part of
Absolutely it is.
psychological wellness.
Absolutely it is. Yeah.
But I also tell people your kids need a happy mom, not a perfect mom.
Yeah. There was this it was in frames, but it was a saying at Home Goods.
Okay.
It said happy kids have moms that have sticky floors and dirty kitchens.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember it verbatim, but it was so powerful. I'm like, this is so
Yes.
true.
Yes.
Sticky floors and dirty kitchens. It is
Mm-hmm.
what it is.
Messy
And
rooms. Yep.
it is temporary. I think that's also something that we have to remind ourselves that, these things are temporary. They are going to grow up and
Yeah.
we have to deal with the empty nest
Yes.
feeling,
Yeah.
So I think, are you okay? Should I
Oh, I'm
continue with
good.
the
Oh,
questions?
yes.
Okay.
I'm loving this. You're going to have to kick me out of here.
How to speed up an acceptance process in any situation if you are a perfectionist? Thanks from Miriam. Should I
Okay,
read it again?
no, well, I was going to ask your maybe interpretation. Like, what do you think the
Sure.
question is? Like, speeding up the acceptance of a situation, a person, an imperfection.
How to speed up an acceptance process in any situation if you are a perfectionist? I guess maybe how to accept. Oh my God, it's hard to understand it, kind of.
Because my mind is going in so many different
Yeah,
scenarios right now, and I want
true.
to be mindful of maybe what they had in their heart when they were asking this question. But
Should we
one of the
FaceTime her?
things,
What do you mean by this,
do you
Miriam?
want to text us? Sorry, I just like hit your microphone.
It's
I
okay.
think one of the things that's coming up for me is this idea that there's a saying that said, suffering comes from resisting the present moment,
Oh, yes.
right? So maybe, again, this is going to be a bit general, so I want to own
Yeah,
that. But I could definitely encourage people to consider how often acceptance is a choice we have to make, and we're
hmm,
choosing not to accept. Not because we want to stay in pain. I do believe at some level we are really hurt by the way things have unfolded. So it's hard to accept. But when I remind myself suffering happens when you resist the present moment,
true.
then I find myself surrendering.
Mm,
So acceptance, I think, goes hand in hand with surrendering. And also, once you accept things as they are, one of my other, genuine philosophy in life is once you accept things as you are, as things are, you can then focus on what you want to change. Okay, like,
true.
you know, you didn't get that job, right? Or um, this relationship ended. So many of us, unfortunately, because of grief and loss, I understand that piece of it, and I don't mean to rush anybody's process when I say this, but we are living in the past when we don't accept things as they are.
Yes.
At some point, we have to accept them as they are so that we can pour our energy into what we might want to do next.
Yeah. That's powerful.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Acceptance is a gift you're giving yourself, just like forgiveness.
I mean, what would it look like? I would ask people to kind of think about this. What would it look like if you never did?
Mm-hmm.
What are the consequences? What are the pros and cons of not?
Yeah.
The suffering, as
Yes.
we talked about, like,
And look, again, I go back to like internal dialogue. If I'm not accepting something, most likely the thought I'm having is this shouldn't have happened, right? The
yeah,
mistake, the hiccup, the disappointment, the breakup, it shouldn't have happened. And it's like you are now fighting against something that's already happened. That's when like accepting things as they are is a gift you can give to yourself for peace of mind and also to move forward.
yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I wanted to briefly dive into is I know you guys, there's so many good ones. I'm not going to get to all of them,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but this one thing that I think is important that probably will be really helpful to a lot of people out there is this people pleasing process.
Yeah.
How, where can they start to
Mm.
not people please? Like, where's the start so that they can obviously reaching out is important and
Yeah.
help and guidance and very.
Mm-hmm.
But what other steps can they take for the people who maybe they can't afford therapy or they can't?
Yeah.
What can they do? How can they tackle that people pleasing behavior? Books, reading, I don't know, acceptance maybe again?
Absolutely. I think it starts with what you just said, though. What are their behaviors? You just have people pleasing
Yep.
behaviors. So I do think that we all need to decide or maybe reflect on what are my top three, maybe most common or most
Uh-huh.
recent people pleasing behavior. Because
Yes,
that's the
okay.
other thing that changes, right? We go through seasons. And today, how I might be people pleasing may look different than what I did 6 months ago. So I do think that every person first needs to tell me, let's start with easy, like two things, two ways that you are people pleasing. Because for some people, again, it might be that I say yes to everything.
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody else, it could be that, well, I don't tell people how things make me feel. Those
Yes,
are two different things.
they are.
Saying yes versus no is so different than expressing my feelings,
Very true.
right?
Very
So
true.
it does start with identifying.
I love that. If that's not powerful, I don't know what is. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
understanding how you're people pleasing.
Yes.
What style? What's the way?
Yeah.
And
What's
it
the
is
way?
different.
Yeah. What's the way? So you kind of also have a direction that way,
Yeah, you do.
right?
You
It's
do.
unfortunately, there's also a little too much information out there where you can just Google and write people
True.
pleasing podcast, people pleasing, YouTube video,
Mm-hmm.
and you will come handful of information out
That's
there,
true.
and you don't know which one is relevant to you. And if you're watching something that doesn't really speak to what you're struggling with, what happens is that you get shut down. You
Yes.
say, "Oh, this is not going to help me. I'm overwhelmed by this information," and then you kind of like stop your growth process because you're not sure what you're looking for.
True.
So again, if
True.
you say, okay, you know what? Again, let's take the typical one. I'm a people pleaser that I always say yes to things. Now we know what to Google. Look up ways to say no. And
Mm-hmm.
then I go back to my behavioral roots here. And I do tell people you have to say no to two things a day. You can't just
Yeah.
say, I'm going to start saying no.
Yeah, immediately. Start little
Immediately,
by
yes.
little.
Yes. And I'm
Very,
all
very
about
true.
like even small things like when I was getting better at confronting people, I started text messages. I
Yeah.
started through text
Writing,
messages.
yes.
Right. It was like it was a good way. And I still till this day, if I have to call somebody and if I have to talk to them, I still role play what I'm gonna say. I still rehearse
Of course.
how
It's
I wanna
hard.
yes, because
It's hard.
I get worried, I can get nervous, I can, obviously like create scenarios in my head. So start small. You can always say no via text message.
I love that.
And the other thing I love is if you're going to start saying no, I think, again, there's so many information out there. You can just Google it.
Yeah.
Ways to say no. Have you seen this one? It's one of my favorite. Instead of telling somebody, sorry, I'm late,
Yeah.
say, thank you for waiting for
Yes.
thank you
That's
for
so
waiting on
popular.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also look up ways to say no that's assertive, that's not passive.
One thing that I've learned from my lifetime, my experience is learning to be more into myself and my needs and
Hmm.
being more conscious of what I want and speaking up, even if it's
Yeah.
someone hurting me and just really vocalizing how I feel. I have learned that this journey, you lose a lot of people around you when you become that version
Mm.
of yourself.
Yeah.
And this is something that I have worked with people that have also identified, like my friends don't want to be my friends anymore. My relatives don't call me as much anymore. Well, you're changing and they're used to
Mm-hmm.
this other side of you. So when you're more authentic and
Yeah.
vocal, it's going to come out
Yeah.
as very aggressive and angry, when in reality, it's not.
Unfortunately,
It's self respect.
people are not changing with you. That's the part
They're
of the
not.
problem.
And,
Because if they
and
also are changing and they're, and I, again, it's not up to us how they should change. But if other people also do the work, do the inner work, then
yes.
we do grow in the same direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also when people are more conscious and aware, they have respect for your change.
Yeah.
And if they love you and they love your true essence and you have
Mhm.
meaning to their life, they will accept this change in you and they'll respect this change.
Yes. And it made me think of next time if someone says to you, they look at you and they say, "Oh, you changed." You say, "Thank you."
Yeah,
Mhm.
I know.
Yes. I'm proud of it. I wanted to
Absolutely.
change. Yes, thank
Exactly.
you for
Thank God you
recognizing the
saw
yes,
it.
thank God you saw it.
Yeah. And if that person
The
doesn't like
scary
it,
thing is
so
people
well.
won't say you changed.
Yeah.
That's the scary
No,
thing.
they'll say it behind your back probably.
Oh,
She's
yes.
so different. Oh,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's like we also have to be comfortable with losing people in our lives.
Yes.
That's what I think. I don't know. I'm tying this together, but breaking up with perfectionism
Yeah.
also means changing your environment. That people also have to be comfortable with that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I
Right.
think whatever you're working on changing in your life, obviously for the better,
Right.
you have to realize the environment you were in was integrated into that old
Yes.
version of you, right? Like,
Yes.
so even your house, or even the people in your house, or even the work routine, things have to change with you. That's why I think I was trying to say if other people also did the work, like people have to change with you and things have to
Yes.
change with you.
That's the beauty.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah. Like,
beauty.
as you know, like um our environment shapes our behavior. So if you
Yes.
want our behavior to change, our environment has to change
Of
too.
course it does.
Otherwise, our behavior will go back to
Of
the
course.
older version if the environment doesn't change. So
That's so true.
when I look at it that way, I don't find it I guess that intimidating.
Yeah. It isn't,
Yeah.
right? It's liberating.
It's liberating.
It's
Yes.
very liberating.
Yes.
Well, this has been a good almost hour and a half.
It's been
It
amazing.
goes by so fast when you're having
It
like an
does.
awesome conversation with beautiful, intelligent women. I appreciate you. I've learned a lot from you, as I'm sure the audience has too.
Oh,
Um, Thank you.
thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. By the
Great
way,
job.
I'm gonna reveal it on air that you're half Turkish.
Oh, yes.
Which is
We
so
talked.
cool. I was
Yeah,
chatting. I'm like, "Oh my
yeah,
god, I wonder how people are going to feel cuz there's
yeah.
this
Yes.
there's this anger amongst people and
Yeah.
there's definitely things that are happening. I'm not going to get into politics cuz it gets really icky and sticky,
Mhm.
but I really appreciate that about you. Like you were so like open about your culture and where you came from, and I
Yes.
respect that, and I'm like really really
Yeah.
grateful that two women can get together like this from different backgrounds, so
Absolutely. Because we have more common than we may.
than the countries.
Yes. Yes.
For sure.
And it takes us to come together, heal, connect, empower,
Yes,
support, love on each other. Yes.
absolutely. So your mom is Turkish, your
Yes.
dad's Armenian.
Yes.
Did they meet in Istanbul? You're from
They did
Istanbul.
meet in Istanbul. So, I mean, my whole family's from Istanbul, my dad's side,
Do you have
obviously.
family there
Yeah,
still?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So they
Wow.
all, my roots are in Istanbul and they knew each other from childhood. So, and then but still, when they got married, there were a few family
Oh my
members that
God.
didn't come to the
Was
ceremony.
everybody okay with their marriage? Like, was there like, oh my God,
Yeah.
she's Turkish or he's Armenian? Was there that controversy ever?
Some family members felt that way,
Really?
but my parents didn't care.
Yeah, good.
Good
They
for
love
them,
you. Good
right?
for them.
Yes. I honestly feel like I'm a melting pot some days. Like my mom is Turkish, my dad is Armenian. My name is actually a Persian name, but
Yeah,
I
it
have no
is.
background in that way. So it's a good
Yeah,
reminder that there's so much beauty and richness
there is.
in
You
all of
speak
us.
full Turkish.
I do.
Does your daughter?
A little bit,
Are you
very
teaching
little.
her?
I try, but my husband is American, speaking again, the melting pot here.
Have you
So,
guys been back? Has he
yeah.
seen Istanbul?
Oh, yes, I took him there twice. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yes.
All right, just wanted to get that out there
Thank
because
you.
but it's part of who you are, and
It
that's important
is.
for
It
me.
is.
So,
And it's I appreciate you holding that space
of
because, you
course,
speaking of being your authentic self, you sometimes shy parts of you
I
that,
know.
you know, that may not be welcome. So I
Do you
appreciate
feel
you.
that way most of the time that it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
because you're Turkish?
Again, this is part of sometimes like you read the rooms, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we walk on eggshells, unfortunately, making sure not to upset people, especially because of the political
Politics.
climate. I don't. I understand where people are upset about and where they have a lot of feelings, but yeah, sometimes you try to.
Just want to let them know that there's a Turkish woman and an Armenian woman in the room and
Yes,
discussing perfectionism. If that's not
yes.
power, I don't know what is. Thank you for
Thank you,
today. I
thank you.
appreciate you.
Aw.